Happy New Year. Welcome to Historically Speaking and our first episode of 2026. And my presidential guests today are Barb and Tom Giffen, and we are going to be talking about living with Revolutionary War ancestors. Barb is the president of the Rutland Historical Society, involved in many historical and patriotic organizations, and her husband Tom, among other things, is the president of the Vermont Old Cemetery Association. And it's wonderful that as a couple that you have these shared interests, because I've known a lot of spouses that had to tag along and kind of nod off during a meeting where one of them was very enthusiastic about the past and the other one not so. But as we move through this commemoration of the American Revolution, 250 plus, we are fortunate by our births and by our research to have personal connections to the revolution. And I think that makes a significant difference because we all learned about the macro history in school, and if we were good history students, we can name the battles, the turning points, etc. But to know how someone who was part of our past functioned and all of that. So my first question for you, Barb, is how did you discover this? Is this something that you were born with? Did you have a mother or a grandmother in the DAR? Or how did you go about finding your first Revolutionary War ancestor?
That's a tough one because I was the spouse that was tagging along.
Before your conversion?
Yes, before my conversion. Tom had his family tree kind of mapped out for him. And I was kind of jealous. Nobody had ever said anything like that. My grandmother and grandfather had a small farm in Clarendon, and they didn't know anything about it. And my other grandmother lived in Rutland. I barely met my grandfather. He was from French Canada. So, I had no clue. So I started digging. And it was I found a piece of paper that had a couple of names on it, and I kept digging and digging and digging. And the first one that I found was my great-grandmother's great-grandfather. And he was in Massachusetts, and I said, well, that's close. I wonder, the timeline, his birth date and everything kind of lined up, but the problem was there was, I believe, 15 Jonathan Barretts born in Massachusetts in that time frame. And I had to follow each and every single one of them to make sure I was looking at the right one. So that was arduous, to say the very least. And from there, I said, well, they usually travel in packs because they married into their friends around the campfire. Mm-hmm. Their families intermarried. So I kept going, and right now I have 10 Revolutionary War patriots that are approved by the DAR, and I've got another 10 that I probably won't be able to do, but it's humbling. Mm-hmm. Very humbling.
So when, time-wise, did you make your first discovery? How many years ago?
Oh gosh, 2007.
Okay.
So it's been 10 years, mm-hmm. 15, 20.
But even in that time, let's say it's 18 years, what we can discover with a click of a mouse, even when you first started. And one of the things that I've learned a great deal, and it's also been a little shattering of myths, is Bill Powers always said, get the complete Revolutionary War file. Yep. So in 2007, they weren't digitized yet. You would write to Washington on the NATF 80 form. And you know, it would take 4 or 5 months sometimes, and if you got the abstract of the file, there was a lot that was missing, where I think pretty much now, certainly through Ancestry.com, and I don't know if Family Search has the complete file, but you learn so much more having the complete file than you would have just in the little abstract they would have sent you 15, 18 years ago.
Oh, it's an amazing thing. I mean, you know, if you read through these files, it's breathtaking to see where these people were, what they were doing, and you do need the whole file. And I remember sending out, and when those files came in, finally, it was like, these are gold. It was just an amazing thing.
You would get the accelerated heartbeat when you would have the manila 8.5 by 11 envelope, and you know, you take it out, and you know, sometimes what they deemed as important in the file would be the nuts and bolts of where they served with whom, but often it's the much later files when you'd have the poor widow in 1850 trying to get her pension when they made it more accessible to widows, and there was no one alive left that could give documentary evidence about the husband that served, etc. So Tom, it sounds like you were born with a Revolutionary War spoon in your mouth because of what your forebears had already done.
Yeah, well, I was very fortunate. From my mother's side, that there was documents all the way back to the Mayflower that had been handed down generation to generation, and all of it was accurate. I remember asking I knew my great grandmother, which is also interesting. I knew them, and so why didn't anybody just do the paperwork to join the Mayflower Society? And she said, why? I know it's right. I don't need their documentation. But my mother especially was very interested in family genealogy. We were kids. We'd go through the cemeteries, or even later, and when I was an adult and walking through the cemetery stones, looking for the name of our descendants to follow it through. She was very instrumental in my interest in history, and plus I was a history teacher by trade, so I've always been very involved in the history, especially since most of my history is in New England. A lot of it's in Vermont. I go back, 12 generations? No.
Oh, no.
10 generations in Vermont. Yeah. So it's a lot easier for me to find the records as opposed to somebody who came from other parts. And as Barbara was complaining all the time was, well, you just got to go, open a page and there's your information. And I didn't have to work too hard. I had to work very hard. And in fact, my mother was in the Vermont library, in the Vermont room of the library, and I was shocked. There was a Giffen book. And it was about Simon Giffen, who was my great grandfather, so many greats ago, when he came came over from Ireland, ended up in Boston and in Nova Scotia. So here's a book that was all written with everything.
And you wonder why I was jealous.
Absolutely everything. So in fact, the author was in her 90s, and I was writing to her about a few things, and it was just here's a book that lays out my side of that family all the way back to the 1600s.
So what was your first Revolutionary War grave, Barb, that you went to visit where you could actually see there it is?
I haven't yet. A lot of my ancestors, I have no idea where they're buried because they started moving west. And one I know is in Michigan. And they found his stone, I guess, toppled over by a tree and replaced it where they think the grave was. But other than that, they don't know where these people were buried. And that's really sad. When the graves, or when the cemeteries are being restored, Tom has been instrumental in a lot of that. They find these gravestones, and in Rutland, there have been a lot of gravestones that have been replaced.
That reminds me, I knew Marvel Swan. Did you know Marvel Swan?
Yeah.
So,
I didn't.
She was a woman of very strong opinions.
Okay.
Yes.
But a wonderful, and Peggy Jenks in her cemetery work was always indebted to what Marvel
Yeah.
did. But when I would meet with her and she had all these cemetery transcriptions, she
Yeah.
always wrote in pencil because it may be wrong. And whoever has some of her original transcriptions, they probably faded beyond recognition. But when I say that she was a person of strong opinions, so I was about 23 at the time, and she handed me an application for the Huguenot Society, and she said, young men like you need to be part of this organization. And when I looked at the thing, that you would have to reject the papacy and all of that, I said, small problem, I'm a Roman Catholic. She tore up the application.
Oh, that's funny. That's a great story.
So, Tom, among your Revolutionary War patriot ancestors, were any of them living in Vermont at the time of their service?
No, most of them were in Massachusetts. One of my, I have a father and son named Edson who were at the Battle of Bunker Hill. In fact, they helped with just to create the defensive bullocks along the side to stop the British from blowing them up. But they both survived, or I wouldn't be here. But John Jr., John Sr., and John Jr. is buried in Brookfield, which I just found out recently on that. So I haven't. But other than that, they were in Massachusetts, and
Were they a Bridgewater family, the Edsons?
Yeah,
yeah.
Yes, they were.
Yeah,
and
they were.
There was the big family joke was one of the administrators at the old Central Vermont Public Services. He was, I think, president or vice president. His name was Edson. He was good friends with my father and my mother. And so when my mother knew that there was an Edson line, and he always would call her cousin. So that was always a big thing. But no, the most came from Massachusetts for the Revolutionary War side, and like on my father's side, John Giffen was a musician. You get that from the old record for that Manila folder that you had that came in. He was a musician, and John and Senior John Jr. I mean, I just imagine him surviving Bunker Hill, let alone surviving and to the end of the war. And this gives you a little difference when you watch the Revolutionary War documentary that was on PBS recently. And that's when you hear about it, it makes it a little different.
Yeah.
I think it's a wonderful thing that it was the first time our government really early attempted to provide pensions for old people, most of whom were farmers who were just worn out. Some of them had war injuries, but sometimes there's a difference between the poverty that they cited in their depositions as to what their descendants made. So in my family, a late discovery was Job Hall, who was from Falmouth, Maine, who served all 5 years in the Revolution. And according to his son, who wrote the entry in the genealogy, he went through the Revolution unscathed and, could still dance a jig when he was 70, etc. But in his pension file, he was down and out and, lived in a cabin that only had 3 windows, et cetera, et cetera. So there is that, I think, the aura of the legend that happens over time.
Yeah, these people were destitute. I mean, they, especially in their older age, you read what they've done, what they went through. I too had a father and son at Bunker Hill. One of the father ended up by getting shot. His pension states that, his son stated that he got shot through the jaw at Bunker Hill. They brought him to Cambridge and he died like 3 days later. The only reason why I'm here is because son stayed around and he lived, but he was discharged from Valley Forge during that winter by Washington. So that just gave me tingles all over. It just like, it came that close.
So when you find someone in your family who was at Bunker Hill, Breeds Hill, as it was at that time, how does that send you on a path to learn more, not only about the individual, but about, I think of David McCullough, wonderful historian, and what he wrote about Bunker Hill in the biography. And, we've got John Quincy Adams. He and his mother could watch the smoke from the battle from Dorchester Heights. So there's, I hope that we can continue in continuing to learn more about the revolution as we move into this era of remembrance.
Well, I hope that people understand that the American Revolution was a slow boil. I mean, it just didn't start out with things that were happening in Boston. There were things like the Stamp Act and things that just kind of irritated and just drove it forward. And then you had the Tea Party, and then you had the Boston Massacre, and then you had, and it just rolled forward, and it was inevitable at that point. By the time they got to Bunker Hill, what was going on?
Even with the Tea Party, people thought, oh, you dumped some tea, big deal. That
No,
tea was worth a lot. They don't realize how much money that was worth. It's like, hundreds of thousands today, if not more. So there was a little more to it than just dumping some tea bags into the Boston.
And I don't think people now completely understand the whole impact that the American Revolution and what it was and how it formed us. I don't think they appreciate that sometimes.
Well, and then along that line, like recently I was involved in Wadebridge, Vermont, where there was a cemetery that was eroding over the bank. And there was a patriot that survived Bunker Hill that was buried there. Mm-hmm. And so I got called by the cemetery commissioners. They said, how can we help? And so we ended up having to move the entire cemetery archaeologically. But what struck me was the town said wasn't interested, and they did not see it was that. In fact, one person said, just let the cemetery go back to nature. And I'm thinking to myself, here's a guy that's buried in Vermont that was at Bunker Hill, and you just want his remains and his wife's remains. And also there was another soldier who served under the commander at Lexington and Concord, was also buried there. As it struck me, it says sometimes they don't value history as much as some communities don't, and others do, and it depends on how many generations back they go. Mm-hmm. But you talked when I was just mentioning about Bunker Hill and people learning more about it. Here was a case where what an opportunity to learn about your town, and the interest was not there. They had to call some yahoo like me from Rutland to come up and see what we could do to solve it. And we did solve it. We moved everything, but we had a very nice military reburial and for the patriot. But you would think that over the generation somebody else would have cared.
Mm-hmm. If you, among those that you have discovered, who is the person you would most likely have to have a time travel with you, would like to have sat down with this person just to have learned more or the experience? And we also have to think about the women in all of this too. So these men go off, and their breadwinner was gone. And again, we know that they were certainly underpaid, not paid, et cetera. So there was a tremendous financial sacrifice with all of this.
Yeah, the ladies stayed home. They raised the kids. Every time that they had multiple kids. I mean, these families were huge. They farmed the fields. They had the kids out there. They took care of the house while the guys were out doing whatever. And some of them followed them. Some of them went with their men. Mm-hmm. But those who stayed behind at the homestead, they had to fend against the things that were happening too. I mean, they had to know how to use the guns and fend off the invaders, and mm-hmm. God knows what that would look like. Were they British? Were they spies? Were they foraging Native Americans, I don't know. They had very strong wills and very, they were incorrigibly brave.
So Tom, you've got a really good head for chronology. What was your longest lived Revolutionary War ancestor? And then if that ancestor had a widow who applied for a pension, that sometimes extends it even farther.
Well, I had John Giffen, which always fascinated me because he's only my fourth great-grandparent.
Wow, those are long generations.
That's not that far,
Right.
when you think about it. I don't remember any pensions for any of them. The Civil War, I have some. Now the pensions, do we have any with the Edsons?
I
We
don't
we did.
I don't recall.
But they were not. But you talk about the Revolutionary War, like in locally in Rutland. Like one of my favorite stones that I replaced for a Revolutionary War patriot was a guy named Brasilia Dewey, and one of his claims to fame was he was present when Major Andre was hanged.
Oh, wow.
And he's in West Street Cemetery. I mean, there's so many. That's just one person. And there's so many like that go along. But we also talk about Vermont wasn't a Vermont.
Yeah.
But there also were, like for example, on my other side of my family, their last names were Tories, and they were Tories. So one of my cousins, he tried to join the SAR, and he said, "Well, you're going to have a hard time with that group." But you think about it, as they're coming down through Virgins and Addison, the British are burning all the homes. I think I'd have a little sign, yes, I'm with you, So I think sometimes you think the human part of the whole story is, so the British are burning every house, and they get to your house, oh no, King George, yes, we're one, But
My Revolutionary War ancestor, the first that I discovered, was Asa Waters of Stoughton, Massachusetts.
Stoughton, yeah.
He was born in 1760, so he was just a teenager when he was involved.
Yeah.
He certainly amplified his own role with age because, as one town historian described him, he was self-styled a captain. But here is the very interesting thing about Asa. When he was a young man, about 26, he married the girl next door. She died. Married another widow. She died. Then, in 1839, he married 30-year-old Susan Shepherd. Now, assuredly, it was a platonic marriage at that point because he was 79. But Asa died in 1845. Susan got the pension and collected it until 1886. So
Good for her.
It's not like, I think the last Revolutionary War widow pensioner was Esther Damon, who died in 1906. But my ancestor's wife, Susan Shepherd Waters, 1886, I think she was the longest lived Revolutionary War widow in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Good for her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. People don't understand what great roots Vermonters have. If you have a New England root that goes back even 3 or 4 generations before 1900, 1850 or so, I bet you dollars to donuts you got some ties to the Revolution around here.
All the cemeteries I go into around New England, Vermont is notorious. You can't go into a Vermont cemetery without Revolutionary War people being buried there or Civil War. It'd be very unusual not to find just locally in the West Street Cemetery and the North Main Street Cemetery, they're Revolutionary War patriots. The Castleton Cemetery, which we just worked in, was there
20.
20, 19 or 20,
there was 20
buried in Castleton. Our history is so amazing, and it's right here. And people don't realize. We're walking distance in a way to, if you're a patriot, to Fort Ticonderoga.
To tie, a lot of the people from
I don't know about
Rutland
you, but I said, I'm not walking from here. Or when I go by, drive through Deerfield, Massachusetts, and you say, Mike, they walked from Deerfield, Massachusetts? That's insane. I don't want to drive that far. But we don't realize how much history we have, and the Chimney Point and all the all along Lake Champlain and Lake George, and we have the history of the United States is within, a few hours drive of Vermont.
Yeah.
And I think it's up to us now, in our generation, to make sure that we can kindle, or in many cases rekindle, the memory. Because something that I've said about before, as an educator, there's probably less and less of the American Revolution that is taught in school, because once upon a time we thought we were doing well if you got to World War II in U.S. history. And the other thing too is there's much more to the story of the American Revolution that's not the storybook thing, because what happened with the curriculum, and it's probably changed a lot since I've left teaching, but they had the first part of American history in 8th grade. And the problem with that is you don't get the opportunity to really study in depth and the complexity of it. And we can always learn something new about the Revolution. And when you have people that chose a different side, the Tories, we need to think of the long-term effects of that. And there were families that were ripped apart. And I think the struggle, and in some aspects of the colonies, it was almost like a civil war. You think of New York City, for example, Philadelphia, the number of divided loyalties. It's certainly worth our studying.
The people that were citing, it was divine intervention many, many times over. In Hubbardton, that slowed the British down only so that things could happen well in Saratoga and in Bennington. And, it's divine intervention all over the place. People don't realize how close we were to not succeeding. And if any of the people who had fought, if it had gone badly, and they would have been hung, their property would have been taken over, it would have been a completely different picture. People don't realize the sacrifices, literal sacrifices, that these people did on a daily basis when they were fighting for this.
But you talk about history and how we should preserve it. I mean, you probably learned history the same way I did, by dates and wars. Like, I still remember in 1066, William the Conqueror invaded, who cares? But I still remember it. but if you teach the human aspect, like Ethan Allen did not walk up those stairs and say, "Okay, take this fort in the name of the great Jehovah and the Continental Congress," which I hadn't even met yet. I mean, he said some other things we won't go into, and how that Benedict Arnold's ego and Ethan Allen's ego is so big. When they walked through, they had to walk shoulder to shoulder through the arch at Ticonderoga. Or when Ethan Allen went to up to Canada, where a Native American tried to stab him with a spear, he takes the little second lieutenant British general and holds him in front so he won't get, and moves him around so he won't get stabbed. That's what history is. It's not the dates. It's not that I take this fort in the great name of the great Jehovah Continental. It's about, I found out there's a year's supply of rum in the basement. Those are the things that people remember. It makes it human, and people remember, and as opposed to 1066, William the Conqueror invaded Normandy.
So my second Revolutionary War ancestor, and again, this was given to me by an elderly cousin, and here is your patriot ancestor. So here is Edward Payne, who drowned in 1785. So son Nathaniel said, I'm testifying on behalf of my mother to gain this pension. My father died in the year 1785. He was born in 1791. So, was this man was he committing perjury? So here is the clue in his deposition: as I have been told, as I understood.
Right.
So, these things that we hope we live long enough to solve, I am still looking for, since the Edward drowned, and then 6 years later this son is born, who is the father. So maybe someday
Yeah.
I will find that out. It's been wonderful having both of you as guests. The time has passed very quickly. And since the revolution goes on and for another 8 years plus, you'll definitely have to come back again for another aspect of this.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
having us.